All wings report in.
HouseDog, standing by.
Mother Goose, standing by.
Lowtech Tuck, standing by.
Lock S-foils in attack position. Animal Squadron ready for battle.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Animal Squadron podcast. You're here with your hairiest host, Mother Goose, and today we have a very special guest star, my good friend, Seth.
Hi, you sound so official on your with your podcast voice.
Lots of practice.
Yeah, we were just talking about this right before recording.
Right.
Just the difference between conversational voice and podcast voice.
Podcast gotta be deep so the people know we're serious.
Yes, we are respectable and you should listen to our opinions.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to talk about real quick just the fact, I don't know if you realize this, but you have been on more episodes of this podcast than any of the actual hosts.
I wanted to talk to you about this because I don't remember anything about what I recorded for this podcast.
Really?
Yeah, I was trying to go through like my emails and all of our texts trying to figure out what it was that I recorded for you because you told me that I recorded something for you and I do not remember it.
Yeah, you're the voice of our intro.
Really?
So our intro, it's a play on the lock S-foils into attack position lines from, I believe, A New Hope.
Yeah, that's A New Hope.
So, yeah, you're like our squadron leader in the intro.
Dude, I'm Red Leader. I'm the one who says lock S-foils in attack formation or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I do kind of remember that, but I have zero actual recollection of that. Like, I remember it conceptually, but I have no imagery or auditory memory associated with that.
Yeah, it was one of our last semesters at college.
Oh, yeah.
We went to our, like, fancy schmancy college recording studio.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was...
And just recorded that. I kind of remember that, but yeah, it was so funny. It must have been something that we did in person because I was looking at because I was looking through every digital footprint we've had together and could not find any history. You said it and I was like, yeah, I kind of do remember him asking me to record some dialogue for this, but I don't have any recollection of what that was.
Well, yeah, so like every one of our hosts, official hosts, has missed at least one episode, and so you have been on more than any of us.
Nice, dude.
Yeah.
I know I've made it now.
For sure. So as always, with all of our guest stars, we want to just take a minute to kind of learn about your Star Wars journey. So what was your first... Like, how did you get into Star Wars, and what's your favorite Star Wars project?
Okay, well, you're going to have to stop me at some point, because...
I will.
I can go on and on about it, but... So, I guess it would start... My Star Wars journey started in the proper way, as you would hope that most people's Star Wars journey started, with my father showing me Episode 4, A New Hope.
Hell yeah.
As a young, spry 5 to 6 to 7 year old, I do not remember exactly what age I was.
Nice.
But I know, I believe it was probably 6, but I don't know for certain. But I have very, very distinct memories of seeing it. Which isn't that rare for me because I have very distinct memories of almost every moment of my life.
Right. Yeah.
Our mutual friend Greg will say that I have a photographic memory, which isn't true. But
I love Greg.
Yeah, but I do. I tend to remember everything that I process.
Yeah.
And so if I'm thinking about it, it's gonna just stick in my head. And boy, was I thinking about Star Wars that night. well beyond the credit sequence, well past the credit sequence. I remember when the first thing I remember about that movie is Darth Vader walking in to the Tantive 4 corridor and there's all these dead stormtroopers and rebels around him. I remember briefly just like the firefight, but there wasn't anything specific about it. I remember like, oh, that was a dangerous situation. And then the image of Darth Vader walking in is just something that is burned. It's laser etched into my brain.
Yeah.
Partially because I thought it was funny that, he breathed, it's the first time I'd ever seen something about like a ventilator or artificial lungs or something like that. And so he has his breathing and it sounds like, and my sister, who was 3, I believe, or 4 at the time, said he likes saying the word cookie. Because it has that cadence of and my mom was like, no, that's how he breathes. And she's like, well, what's wrong with him? And my mom, this was before,
got him.
This was before Revenge of the Sith came out.
Yeah.
And so we didn't, there had been hints, and of course we didn't as kids know them, and my parents as casual fans didn't know the expanded universe, but like they were like, he got injured, and that was just so captivating. The idea of this super powerful evil guy, but he's also kind of this decrepit, injured, in this state of agony, while also being this super evil, powerful guy. Really stuck in my head. And I don't tend to like, in general, and we'll talk about this later in the episode, I'm sure, but in general, I don't like when people are overly fond of anything, really. But I could go on and on about that entrance for Vader. And I think, was it like Mark Hamill talked about how that scene stood out to him because he wanted to be on set that day of shooting. Yeah. And he was like, George, why don't you have a line about, who's he? Oh, he's the Dark Lord of the Sith. He's Darth Vader. He's and George said, he's in a white corridor. He's wearing a black helmet. He breathes weird. They're going to get it. And I think George knew that, like, even as a kid, I understood the conceit, so to speak, of Darth Vader. Of that he's this man whose evil has destroyed him, and he has gained unfathomable power from it, but it's also deprived him of his humanity.
Right.
And there's all sorts of things I could keep talking about in A New Hope. Luke's lightsaber, the fact that Obi-Wan says your father wanted you to have this when you were old enough. And as a kid, that is like the best thing to ever hear. Because it means you're about to get something dangerous and cool. and
yes, for sure.
And then it turns out to be a laser sword. And I was just in awe of the laser sword being waved around on screen.
Yeah. That's really awesome.
And then finding out that lightsabers can cut through anything. And then but they can't cut through each other, so you could have sword fights with them. That's so cool.
Right.
Yeah. Just I can remember the specific thought processes that I had as a kid watching A New Hope.
Yeah, I don't have like as specific as detailed memories, but I definitely remember certain moments. Like the hallway scene and the lightsaber for the first time. It's just, it is magical as a kid.
Yeah, it is.
So we've been talking about New Hope for a little bit. Is this your favorite Star Wars project?
My favorite Star Wars project really jumps around depending on the mood I'm in and where I am in life.
Yep.
For a long time it was Revenge of the Sith because it was the coolest, quote unquote, coolest Star Wars. Yep. As a angsty teenager. When I was going through my purist era, when I was going through my opinions about film are much better than the average person's. It was, Empire obviously, because
right.
Empire, and like I still consider Empire to be the best. Objectively,
yeah.
Like taking my personal feelings out of it, I consider Empire to be the best Star Wars movie. It's the Star Wars movie that's best at being Star Wars, if that makes any sense. Like the things that
I totally get it.
The things that I think of when I think of Star Wars are best embodied by Empire.
Yeah, and I think so. For me, when we did, it's funny because when we did our ranking of all the films, that was my number 1, and number 2 was Episode 3 and Episode 5.
Yeah, that's a lot of people's.
I mean, they're great.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for the most part, it's whatever bit of media I'm currently absorbing.
The recency bias, I get it.
Yeah. With the exception of Book of Boba Fett, check out Setherton on YouTube if you want to see my opinions on Book of Boba Fett. I don't hate it. I just think it's indicative of some corporate issues with storytelling.
Yeah.
Anyways, but like if I had to choose, I have several comfort Star Wars movies where it's like if I'm feeling down and I'm in the mood for Star Wars, this is what I'm going to turn to. The first of which is A New Hope. That is the one that I can just put on and I know I'm going to have a good time and I'm going to get whisked away into the far off. Even the boring parts of just Luke complaining about being on a desert planet hold this sort of nostalgia and magic to them that I can just put it on and I know that it immediately is like a comfort movie.
For sure.
Yeah. I really like Phantom Menace, and it gets a bad rap. Even in, the machete cut of Star Wars or whatever, cut out Phantom Menace entirely. I adore
Really?
I adore Phantom Menace. I think it's fantastic.
I do too.
I think the fact that every single character gets their moment at the exact same time in the climax of the movie is one of the hardest things to do in storytelling.
Yes.
Having written a play where I needed to have 6 different characters have an emotional climactic turning point at the same time, I know just how difficult it is to juggle all of that. And the fact that you have Padme outmaneuvering Newt Gunray, you have Jar Jar proving his prowess on the battlefield, you have Anakin blowing up the Federation ship, you have Qui-Gon giving his life to ensure that the next generation of Jedi lives on, you have Obi-Wan avenging his master's death. Every single character has their moment, all within 15 minutes of each other, and I just love how it all comes together like that. George Lucas once said, I think I may have gone too far in a couple places in Phantom Menace. I think he went just far enough with that movie.
I completely agree. Well, my friend, are you ready to start talking about Heir to the Empire?
Yes. Take a trip from CG Gungans and droid control ships blowing up to the fun economics of mining vessels and what power source Luke's robotic hand uses.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be talking about the Thrawn Trilogy and the it was announced
the original
a few months
Thrawn
ago
Trilogy. The original Thrawn Trilogy. Because there's a new one, but
there is a new one which I've heard some good things about, but the Dave Filoni film that we heard about at Star Wars Celebration has just been confirmed to be titled Heir to the Empire, which most of us figured there'd be a connection, but
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like within the last week.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm sorry, this is the first time hearing about it. I figured that it would be like some kind of adaptation, but to hear that they're just actually going for it is so cool.
Right?
Editor Elijah here. So apparently this is just a rumor. It has not been officially confirmed yet. There is still a chance that it will be called Heir to the Empire, but we can't say for sure that it is at this current moment.
Which, Honestly, I thought that's why you wanted to talk about it, was because we just got in the news. I was like, this is great timing. Yes.
No, I'm just that passionate about it.
So yes, we're going to be talking about some of our favorite moments from like the novels and what we think actually could be adapted well to a film. And, you know, we are also going to be taking a look at the, what are they fans calling it now? The Filoni verse, Rebels, Clone Wars, Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, all these new characters that'll be in it.
Yeah, in my head, it's just Star Wars.
I completely agree.
In my head, there's no separation between, say, Attack of the Clones and Rise of Skywalker. It's all the same story, just told over and over. It's just told throughout its eras by different people, and it's different people's takes on what that story means. So there's no distinction in my head between. I think Filoni has done more things that I like than J.J. Abrams, but in terms of like, who has ownership of it? Like, it does not matter to me.
Yeah, I think I'm not the biggest fan of the Filoni verse for similar reasons. It doesn't bother me as much though. I just look at it as a way to say, these are the characters that are going to be appearing in the film, most likely.
Right. I think we should preface this by saying I have not seen all of Rebels.
Okay.
I've seen the first 2 seasons, and I know what happens. I know the major plot points. I know the beats, mostly through talking with our mutual friend Curran, who may come up later because he's the one I normally talk to about all this. And so he's kind of explained to me some of it, and I am currently watching Rebels.
Good. Yeah, because I want to finish it. So good.
Yeah, now that I know that it's going to be so important to what is going to become Heir to the Empire, I'm definitely on board. And so I haven't seen Rebels and I haven't seen Andor, which I know is a war crime in this fandom. So those are my blind spots when it comes to Star Wars. I've seen every other project and every other show, movie, etc. I've played the Jedi games. I've played a lot of the Expanded Universe, Old Republic games. I know what that's all about. I've read books. I've read so many books of Star Wars, but I do have a blind spot where the final 2 seasons of Rebels and the
Andor come into place.
Andor series are concerned.
I don't think Andor is going to be important to Heir to the Empire, if I'm being honest, just because, I mean, spoiler warning for a movie that came out like 5-6 years ago. He died.
Andor's not going to be an Heir to the Empire, or things have gone very wrong.
Unless it's a clone, which we're definitely going to be talking about some cloning today.
We are going to be talking about clonings, because Heir to the Empire, the book, was one of the first times cloning ever became a major plot point in Star Wars.
Right. So have you read the whole trilogy?
I have, and I adored almost every word of it. And you do have to like read Heir to the Empire with a slightly different perspective than you enjoy all of the other Star Wars projects, right? Because it does contradict the prequels in a couple significant ways. There's a mention that like Darth Vader didn't lose his right hand until after the Death Star blew up in those books.
Gotcha. Okay.
That the idea that like there was a mention that the Emperor cut off Vader's hand as punishment for losing the Death Star.
That is honestly really cool, though. I like that.
I do like it because it follows it up with Vader cutting off Luke's hand on Bespin.
I lost my hand because of you.
Yeah.
You lose my hand because of me.
And Luke has this like whole thing in that scene about thinking about generational trauma and how like the trauma that the father experienced gets passed on to the son. And I actually like that. And I know that it's not canon and there's no way that can be canon, but I really like how that's done. And that's kind of indicative of what the whole book trilogy is. Yes, it doesn't fit with canon anymore. Yes, it there's no way that some of the things in it can fit with canon, but I really like the way it was executed.
Yes, and I'm so sorry. now all I'm imagining is like Vader showing up, telling Palpatine they lost the Death Star, and Palpatine saying, "You lose your hand privileges," and just taking his robotic hands off.
Yeah. Give me those grabbers.
You can have these back when you've been good.
You're right. But that it creates this great and this is kind of what I'm talking about, like Timothy Zahn, the author of this book series, is so good at picking out little tiny details in the trilogy and putting meaning to them.
Yeah,
like
I
the fact,
agree.
like the idea that Vader lost his hand in retribution for Luke blowing up the Death Star, and then he took Luke's hand, and then what does Luke do in Return of the Jedi? He cuts off that same hand of Vader
like
in his moment of rage. It just exemplifies the never-ending cycle of abuse and hurt that the dark side produces. And that's something that I think Zahn really understands about Star Wars. He gets what Star Wars is about. And that's everywhere in that trilogy. He understands that you can't just have cool ship battles, but the ship battles should make sense on a military standpoint. He understands that.
I mean, George Lucas has said multiple times that, like, Star Wars isn't about the spaceships and the battles. It's much deeper than that.
Yeah. And it's something that, you know, when I was back when I was in my opinion is much better than yours phase. You know, I didn't like about the new trilogy was that I felt like a lot of the stuff was just, oh, cool space battle, and there wasn't much substance to it.
Yeah.
You know, it's old news now that The Last Jedi is essentially A New Hope. And one of my issues was just that it didn't have the same heart as A New Hope. The things that happened in it didn't hold the same meaning as A New Hope. Now, looking at it and having read the Rise of Skywalker novelization, which is one of the best new Star Wars bits of media, by the way, the book version of Rise of Skywalker.
Okay.
And seeing like, okay, these actually do all fit together really well. I've changed my opinion on the sequel trilogy, but there's like there's this heart to Star Wars that it means something, and it's cool to see this lightsaber in Luke's hands. It's cool to see him wave it around. But there's also this incredible amount of humanity and this philosophy and the theming of this world that fits into Luke. George once described it. He kind of described. I know there's a common quote about him saying it's like poetry. It rhymes.
It rhymes. Yeah.
Let me pull this up. I have it written down. But he recently in an interview talked about how he gave a little bit more about what he means, less than just that the story beats match up. He actually meant something a little bit more than just that. He talked about this thing called a poetic state, where the idea is that the Force kind of brings the galaxy into a poetic state. The idea of there being heroes, like there are heroes, there are villains, things will become epic by its very nature. The Force will make things epic. The Force will bring things into a state that is idealistic and optimistic and poetic like that. The idea, I think I wrote this down. Somebody was like, when things get chaotic, dark, and unbalanced, George said that this is the unpoetic trend, that this is like the dark side is corrupting the poetic nature of the galaxy in Star Wars.
Yeah.
So the idea about like bringing balance to the Force is less about, oh, you have to have equal light and dark, and more about bringing back this idealistic, thematic, philosophical state in the galaxy.
Yeah, okay, so talking about that, sorry, this is a long tangent that's nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I learned recently that the light side of the Force is not mentioned at all in the original 6 films.
No, there is no light side of the Force.
Right, it was originally mentioned in an EU novel. I don't think it was the Thrawn Trilogy.
I don't believe
I think it was
so.
a novel before the Thrawn Trilogy, and I think the only only one movie in the sequel trilogy kind of alludes to the light side.
Is it The Last Jedi?
It's either Last Jedi or The Force Awakens. I think it might be Maz's line about there's always been light and dark.
Yeah.
And so
I know that. Yeah, The Last Jedi has that scene where Rey is like actually figuring out what the Force is for the first time.
Right. Yeah.
Which, by the way, is the best scene in the entire sequel trilogy, but has the has the light and dark and chaos and order, and between it all, a force. Which
yes,
I just gave myself chills like IRL from that line, from thinking about that line. But
no, it's really opened my eyes on like the Force, because that's something that I've really struggled with, is the balance and the prophecy, and because I was looking at it as from a perspective of light and dark, and like Western philosophy says balance is the light above the darkness, while Eastern philosophy says an equal mix of both. And I just felt like the story that was being told didn't really cater to either side. And now that I know this, I feel like there's so much. It's so much deeper than I realized.
Yeah, and in my head, it's like, where's the and yes, there is a lot of Eastern philosophical influence on Star Wars, but it was made for a Western audience. Like one of George Lucas's major like good points, the thing that I think defines George Lucas is his ability to take concepts and make them presentable to a Western audience. Right.
Yes. Yes.
He took the samurai film and made it presentable to a Western audience. He took Buddhist philosophy and made it presentable to the Western audience. He took the Viet Cong's perspective on the Vietnam War and made it presentable to a Western audience 3 years after the Vietnam War ended.
Yes.
You know, like that. Like, I'm sorry to anyone who doesn't know this, but the original trilogy is about the Vietnam War, and and the rebels are the Viet Cong. Sorry for ruining your childhood, but that's something that George has been very clear about,
vocal about. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I'm gonna kind of just bring us back in. To Heir to the Empire.
Man, I gotta come on this podcast more often because I can just wax eloquent about this.
Literally, like, so we all three of us, me, Mac, and Tuck, we're the exact same way. Like, sometimes we literally just have to say, okay, we're doing a tangent episode. We have no plans. We just get on and we talk.
Right. But we actually had like a conversation about what this episode should be about.
Right. Yes.
So why don't we say LAFO, which stands for Listen and Find Out, about Seth's opinions for later episodes. We'll save that for later episodes.
Yes, for sure.
So LAFO on Seth's ideas about Star Wars and the way it applies to our culture. Spoiler alert: Seth is a communications major and finds all of this stuff fascinating. So we'll do an episode later about this.
A whole episode on that. So bring it back to Heir to the Empire.
Right, we are talking about a fictional universe, aren't we?
Yes. Based on everything you know from like Mandalorian, the Clone Wars, what you have seen in Rebels, and also considering where the universe has to end with the creation of the First Order so that the sequels can happen, what from the Thrawn Trilogy do you think could be pulled into this movie? What can successfully be adapted without them like contradicting themselves? Yeah,
so and I'll preface this, and it's going to sound like I'm starting on a tangent, but I promise it ties back into what we're talking about.
No, I get it. I get
it. One of Dave Filoni's biggest strengths is taking a little innocuous line that wasn't really meant for anything other than just like to get the characters from point A to point B in a conversation, and figure out how to make that a major story element that has real emotional impact on the story. That's one of his big strengths. That's what basically Clone Wars was him taking Anakin and Obi-Wan chatting about their previous adventures in Revenge of the Sith and turning it into a whole show.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and there's a few things in the Thrawn trilogy. This is where it comes back that I know Dave Filoni has read because I know he likes certain elements of that George doesn't.
Yes. Okay. I'm gonna throw just one little thing in because I can't remember what season it's in. Minor spoilers. We do get to see. I'm gonna butcher this name, but Anaghiri?
Nogri,
is that it?
That's how I always read. I'll be clear. I haven't listened to any of the audiobooks of it, but I always read that word as Nogri. The
Gotcha.
You're talking about Rook.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. Thrawn's little attendant guy.
Yes, the assassin.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know that's something specifically that Dave has pulled from the original Thrawn trilogy.
I do know that Rook is in Rebels and acts in the exact same. I know that Thrawn's in Rebels. I know that Rook's in Rebels. I know what they do. I know that it's perfectly in line with Heir to the Empire, and I love it for that.
Yes. Anyway, keep going on your tangent. I just, we were talking about Dave Filoni and him pulling stuff.
Yeah. One of the major, and this is, we should say, I'm sure that people know this about this podcast, but every spoiler is on the table.
Oh yeah. I was going to make a spoiler warning at the beginning, and now we're 40 minutes in.
Right. I'm not going to try to pull punches about what happens in Heir to the Empire.
That's totally fine.
That whole trilogy.
It's almost 30 years old now, so they had their chance.
Yeah, what was it? It was 90s. Yeah, right after Jedi. And anyways, so one of the major things that's foreshadowed in the first two books of the Thrawn trilogy that if you're paying attention becomes pretty obvious, and it's a cool moment when you figure out what Thrawn's plan actually is. But one of the big reveals is that Thrawn has reintroduced clones into the military. Has brought clones back to military use, and that he has been throughout the first two books he has been handpicking officers and soldiers who do well and sending them to go be cloned to fill the new Empire's ranks. I think that concept is fascinating, especially since he's doing it way better than the Republic did, where they just had one guy. And they just cloned him over and over. Granted, that guy was a Mandalorian bounty hunter who probably had a great track record, but still, and this is not a diss at all of any of the clones. The clones are my boys, and may they live eternally. But the idea that he specifically singles out people that he sees potential in and sends them to go get cloned to create his armies is fascinating. It's a great strategy, and I think it would fit with the sequel trilogy because there's a point where Kylo Ren says to Hux maybe they'd be more effective if it were a clone army.
Yes, I agree.
So there's this potential that maybe they've seen a clone army in this particular conflict. Hux is against the idea. Hux might be against the idea of cloning to fill his ranks, which is why he uses conscripts taken at childbirth, like Finn. But they've seen how effective Thrawn can be with that, and that's the sort of thing where it's Filoni will look at that line, will look at that. Maybe they'd function better as a clone army, and extrapolate all sorts of story beats out of it. Yes. And I think that's strategy from Thrawn in Heir to the Empire trilogy would play so well and tie into that, because when you watch The Force Awakens, you get to that line and it's just like, haha, he mentioned clones. But if you've seen Thrawn using clones, that line takes on a whole different meaning. It would make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's one of the main things I want to talk about, because I feel very confident that cloning will play a huge part of it. I'm hoping it's a clone army, and We'll talk about some other specific characters that get cloned here in a little bit, but I'm hoping it's both.
Right. I'm hoping that the like this what's the Shadow Council, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
From the Mandalorian.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. That they've got their hands in a lot of different baskets. That they're
right.
The idea of like they're using Grogu to study cloning and midichlorians and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And which, that obviously comes into play with like the strand casts that created Palpatine in Rise of Skywalker.
Right.
Project
that's the Necromancer.
Yeah, that's like the natural conclusion, but it could also feed into, I believe, Moff Gideon in the finale of Mandalorian season 3. You've seen it, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Mentioned that he wanted to create a Mandalorian army that was force sensitive, which could tie into Thrawn's desires to create an optimized clone army.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is the sort of thing that I feel like there's very little that needs to be explained to just slip this into the canon.
Right. I think that Thrawn personally would hate Moff Gideon, but I do think he would look at his research and really value it.
Yeah, I think that it's I would love to see, because you don't see Thrawn despising many people.
Right.
Generally, if he sees them as useful, he sees them as he holds them in high esteem. Like he even respects Vader despite his disagreement with how Vader does things, and because Vader gets results.
Like, he even respects, like, it is very clear that he respects Hera in the Rebels series, which I love. Which I think we should talk about. Just a quick little tidbit about Thrawn for people who haven't read the novels and who haven't watched Rebels. Thrawn
you are missing out on the best villain from Star Wars.
100%. But Thrawn is a military genius. Like, this man, the way he strategizes is crazy.
He is not just a military genius. His whole people, his whole species are military geniuses, and he's the one that was selected by them to go be a military genius in the Star Wars galaxy.
Yes, there's a moment specifically in Heir, I believe it's Heir to the Empire, correct me if I'm wrong, where they get attacked by a New Republic convoy or fleet, and he kind of pulls most of his fleet back, sends a single ship in that it dies. He essentially sacrifices it to see how well the New Republic is strategizing. And then just from that one ship dying, he's able to deduct that the Admiral is not with their fleet, and then comes up with a plan that absolutely decimates the New Republic in that battle.
Yes, that was Heir to the Empire. I believe that he not only deduced that the Admiral wasn't there, but he also deduced what species the commander of that fleet was and was able to predict, based on knowing that species culture and knowing the things that they value, was able to predict what strategy they would use.
Right. And something else just to go on, like, how cool of a character this is. He is one of the only people that knows that Darth Vader is Anakin and lived.
He wasn't told that Darth Vader was Anakin.
He just figured it out based on Darth Vader's, like, flying maneuvers in his TIE fighter.
And then he maneuvered Darth Vader into stepping into the role of Anakin. Right. For one of the books. I have you read Thrawn Ascendancy? Or not Thrawn Ascendancy?
I haven't.
The new Thrawn Trilogy?
I haven't got a chance to yet, but I've looked at recaps of them, and I mean, he just is...
Yeah. He uses
so smart.
He uses the fact that he knows that Vader's Anakin, knows that his force powers are prediction based, that, like, Anakin specialized in seeing into the future, and capitalizes on that to have Vader fly them through hyperspace using the Force to predict if they'd run into anything. And Vader literally pilots a Star Destroyer through hyperspace using the Force to guide him, on
Hell
Thrawn's request. It is one of my favorite endings to a Star Wars book in general.
For sure.
Yeah, and he did that because he knew that Vader was Anakin.
So we've talked about Thrawn a little bit. Let's talk about some of the other important characters from the original novels. So I think let's just get into it. Let's talk. We don't have to get into it long, but let's talk about Luke, Leia, and Han.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
No, it's just that like I was just gonna say that as far as we've seen from Luke from The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, like he can just slot right into his role in Heir to the Empire.
Yeah,
there are no issues with him being exactly as he was in those books.
Right. I'm really unsure.
He hasn't. Sorry, continue.
No, that's okay. I'm not really sure how much they're going to use our original trio within this new film.
Yeah, it does seem like Ahsoka and Hera and Sabine will be the major players in this.
Yeah.
Particular thing. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a few episodes where like, oh, we have to go to Coruscant to speak with Senator Leia and or
right.
God forbid even Chancellor Leia, you know.
So
like
I'm
I
calling
wouldn't be
it
surprised
now.
if there's that.
There's a scene in the trailer where Hera's talking to 5 politicians. Mon Mothra's in the middle. I guarantee one of them is Leia, and they digitally replaced him with someone else, or her for someone else in the trailer.
Oh yeah, I mean they wouldn't pass that up.
Yeah. What was it? Kathleen Kennedy recently had a quote about not recasting. Not recently. I think this was years ago after Solo, about how they messed up trying to recast one of the original 3. And there's been a lot of debate. We don't have to get into it if the CGI for Luke was good or not. So I'm just, and the fact that we haven't really seen them, I don't know.
I think that it was much better in Boba Fett than it was in The Mandalorian. But my big thing is their voice acting. He just said every line with the exact same cadence. And anyways, we can have a whole episode devoted to Book of Boba Fett.
Well, we haven't reviewed it on this podcast yet, so we might bring you back.
All right, I'm always down for that. I want to see, and this is something from Heir to the Empire that was alluded to in Rise of Skywalker, I want to see Leia's Jedi training. There's this kind
100%.
of internal conflict. Yeah, there's this kind of internal conflict with Leia in that trilogy between her politician, Leia as the politician, Leia as the wife and mother, and Leia as the Jedi. And there's this kind of 3-way conflict that she has because she is quite honestly the most capable person in the entire galaxy. But she finds that she has these ties to these 3 different versions of herself, and each of them has their own benefits. Each of them would ultimately be a good thing if she pursued it, but they're all equally good in her mind. And she has this conflict. It's not a bad conflict to have. It's like, do I be the best mother and wife in the galaxy? Do I be the best politician in the galaxy? Or do I be the best Jedi in the galaxy? That's not a bad problem to have. But it is like a conflict for her. And I'd love to see that in the in this new movie. And the Ahsoka series, assuming that she's in it.
My hope is that it's kind of hard to do like a whole trilogy within just one movie, and I think we've only gotten one confirmed so far. Yeah. So my hope is that, yes, I want to see the Ahsoka series be a good series on its own, but I'm really hoping that we get a lot of the setup for Heir to the Empire within the Ahsoka series. And that way, we can kind of just get into it and not have to cram all of that into such a short amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, we all want it to be like something that can stand on its own, but at the same time, a lot of these shows don't we're kind of past the need for something to be good standalone, right?
Right.
Like who's gonna watch the Ahsoka series without watching any of the movies or Clone Wars?
is very true.
You know,
that is very true.
There is something to be said about it having good like literary merit if it can stand on its own. But at the same time, you're not going to watch, Attack of the Clones and be like, yes, I love how it exists in its own microcosm, and it
is
does
its
not
own bubble.
Rely on other. Yeah, there's like it was never intended to just be standalone on it. It was always intended to be this big interconnecting story.
Right. I think some of my worries though is, it's not as bad as I think a lot of people make it out to be, but sometimes with these larger cinematic universes, some projects are just kind of there to promote other projects or future projects. And I don't know if we've talked about this. Like, Ahsoka is my all-time favorite Star Wars character, and so like,
yeah,
I want this to be good. I want this to be good. You know,
you want to be able to like point at it like you can point at Andor and say like, this is great. This is peak Star Wars right here.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. And I have no reason to think it won't be that, but like, and this is something that I wanted to talk about when we first decided on the topic of this episode. But I've been saying since the beginning, and I can pull up the text conversations with Curran to prove it, that as we that ever since that episode in season 2 that featured Ahsoka, that Mandalorian is not the plot of Star Wars. Mandalorian is an extra who got his own show.
Yeah.
He is not interested in the galaxy wide. He's not interested in the Force. He's not interested in the battle of light versus dark. He's just trying to stay alive. He's just trying to stay alive to be a good dad. Keep his kid alive. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he accidentally stumbles into the plot.
Yeah. Right.
And that's it's one of the main like big things that makes him so attractive as a character is that he's just trying to live and be a good dad, and he accidentally finds his way into the A plot of Star Wars.
Right. Yes.
And it's something that I've been saying since that Ahsoka episode came out, that Ahsoka, because that show got greenlit like very soon after that episode aired. Was that Ahsoka is going to be the A plot of Star Wars for that era.
I think so. I think she's gonna essentially, her and Ezra will essentially take the Luke and Leia roles in Heir to the Empire.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm totally here for that. Like, as much as I love Luke and Leia, technology isn't there yet.
Right.
To have them be main characters in their own projects, the deep fake Luke and Leia.
But at the same time, if they're not there at all, I think that it just wouldn't make sense. Like, they've been through all of this to defeat the Empire, and now the first time it's rising, they're kind of just like, hey, we did our part, you guys handle it.
Right. And I get that. And I do want to see Mara Jade and Luke Skywalker dueling.
Yes, I wanted to talk about that too.
Joris Kaboth and, the you must kill Luke Skywalker thing. I want to see all of that. But I can totally understand why they would instead go with Ahsoka and Ezra as kind of the forerunners of that series. Maybe even that movie, because you have these actors who can do it. And you can rely on those actors to do it and those characters to carry that, while also having Luke and Leia and Han and Lando and all that
still be a part of it. Yeah,
they can be a part of it, but I understand why they might decide to put Ahsoka, Ezra, Sabine, and Hera kind of at the forefront.
As the main. Yeah. I think what we're gonna essentially get is we will see them, but it will be a, Leia and Han are really focused on getting the New Republic up and running, and maybe we've seen throughout The Mandalorian that there's a lot of corruption already within the New Republic, and maybe they're really focused on that, and Luke is just really focused on getting this school up and running.
Right.
So it's not like it's not like they're just sitting there twiddling their thumbs. They're still doing things that are important to the galaxy. They're just not necessarily the main ones fighting Thrawn.
Right. Well, and it makes sense that like I think it's canon that the New Republic didn't consider whatever Thrawn and Operation Cinder and the remnants of the Empire are doing to be a legitimate threat. Which is why Leia left the New Republic Senate and became General Leia with her resistance. Because she recognized the actual threat, whereas nobody else really did. Which is why it's perfect to bring Thrawn in as the person who brings about the creation of the First Order.
Yes, I agree, because, I mean, it all just, the way it plays out for them is, in my opinion, more of a Thrawn plan than a Palpatine plan. I know it's Palpatine's plan, but, I mean, things just go so good for the First Order. Yeah. No, and it's I hesitate to ever say like, oh, the story writes itself, but the story literally, like, it's like a connect the dots. You can see how adding Thrawn to the 30-year span between Jedi and Force Awakens will bring about the conditions present in the Force Awakens. Yes, I completely agree. And like, as we mention on this podcast all the time, your Star Wars is your Star Wars. Like what you like, dislike what you dislike. I am not the biggest fan of the sequel trilogy. And I really think this is going to be my Clone Wars. You know, a lot of people say, well, I didn't really like the sequel or the prequels until the Clone Wars because it added so much more context. And I think what Dave Filoni's doing and Heir to the Empire and Jon Favreau as well, this is going to be my Clone Wars where things start to click. Yeah, and I think that's something that I wanted to touch on too. Was just like I said, Filoni's main strength is taking these little lines and these moments and all of this and turning wonderful stories out of them. Yeah, and I am so ready because I'll admit to being a film snob when the sequel trilogy came out. In retrospect, there really wasn't nearly as much to hate about those movies that I or anyone else really said. In my opinion. And I think it was a lot of mob mentality. It's one of those things where I do think Star Wars is better as in limited series runs. I think Star Wars is better in show form. I agree. Now that the universe is so big, back when it was just Luke, Leia, Han, and like 5 planets total, it could be done in movies. But I do think with the ambition that Star Wars writers have currently, it works better in shows. And what that means is that when we get movies, the movies aren't going to be able to tell the entire story. I mentioned earlier that the Rise of Skywalker novella is my favorite of the canon, like the new media since Disney purchased it. And that's because it adds so much depth to that story. It recontextualizes every single scene to the point where I legitimately get emotional during... Interesting. I will have to read this. Very different parts of the like all throughout that movie. And yes, I will 100%. Anyone who wants to like the sequels more needs to read The Rise of Skywalker. It's the expanded the expanded novelization is the official thing because it adds more scenes to the movie. But I am just so excited for what Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni and even Kathleen Kennedy, because guess what? She was also the producer of Rogue One and Kenobi and The Mandalorian. Right. As much as she's vilified for all of the for the sequel, she also produced some of the best Star Wars stories ever told. Yes, that's the exact way I feel about her. Is like, on one hand, some of my least favorite projects are under her, and some of my favorite projects are, and that's okay. Yeah, so I mean, I'm just so
what a time to be alive as a Star Wars fan, I guess would be
really
my point that I leave
best time
with
to be a Star Wars
is that
fan.
we are in the Renaissance era of Star Wars. This is you never before have we had so many stories told by so many talented people. Just and not only like available but also in the mainstream. Because yes, there were a bunch of expanded universe books before, but you had to like have a library card to and like frequently visit your childhood library to really know about them. But like to have Star Wars be so in the mainstream while so many great stories are being told. And not only are great stories being told, but they're paying respect to what came before by picking over the best parts of the expanded universe and finding ways to fit them in. It just, it's such a great time to be a Star Wars fan.
I agree. Well, so we're going to have to wrap this up. I've got a couple quick questions. We don't have to really dive deep into them, but I'm just going to bring up a couple things from the Thrawn Trilogy.
That's Elijah telling me to not drone on and on and on about.
No, it's also for me too.
Answer.
Like I said, this show is built on tangents. So just a couple quick things. Mara Jade and clone Luke.
Yeah. Not super important to me that they are included. I'd like to see, you know, the Mara Jade stuff. I think she has a great conflict in the story with her whole deconstruction of everything that the Emperor told her, and her imperial conditioning and her having this psychological need to kill Luke while also realizing that he's a really good person.
Right.
You know, that's a great story, and I think that it deserves to be told in the mainstream. At the same time, I don't know how it would fit in the current canon. Yeah.
I think
it's something that's like, if they find a way, I'd really enjoy it, but it's not super important to me that they include it.
I think they could include her as an Inquisitor. I think it could fit. Yeah.
Oh.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
But
that's Luke's whole thing, is he's on the run from this Inquisitor. Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Right? But I do think that if we are going to get Mara Jade, we should get clone Luke. And if we're going to get clone Luke, we should get Mara Jade. I would rather have I'd rather have both than neither. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well,
because I just feel like the story's so connected in Heir to the Empire between the two of them. And, you know, normal Luke, of course.
Well, right. But, like, because, like, her, you know, again, spoilers for The Last Command, which is the third book in the Thrawn trilogy. But the way that Mara gets over her psychological need to kill Luke Skywalker is by killing his evil clone.
Right.
Which is just as wacky and dramatic as it sounds, and I love every second of it. And I like it. It's one of those things that it's not super important to me that it happens. I do agree that if they have Mara Jade, that they need to have clone Luke, because how else are you going to write your way out of that?
Right.
But it's like, and I would say it's important to me because I really, really enjoy Mara Jade as a character, and I want to see her exist, you know.
I'm going to say something a little morbid. I think for Last Jedi Luke to work for me personally,
he needs to have a dead wife.
He has to have a dead wife. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, but it would help motivate Last Jedi Luke.
that change in his character. Yes, 100%.
Yeah, he would bring about the death and destruction of everyone I ever cared about. And in the briefest moment of hesitation, I thought I could stop it. If he's married to Mara Jade during that scene where he's about to kill Ben.
Yeah, and then if she
dies, about how that could and then it actually happens because of his hesitation. Yeah.
Yep.
No, that would totally work. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because that was kind of in the back of my mind that it would be great plot fodder for The Last Jedi.
Yeah. Okay, so next thing I want to bring up is the lizards, the Ysalamari, I believe is how it's pronounced.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, I read that as Ysalamari just because I can't make phonemes work in my head that don't work in English.
Understandable. So what these are for people that don't know is just a lizard. There's a species of lizards that negate the Force, that are immune to the Force, and like when a bunch of them come together, they can create this like really large Force bubble. I don't know how you're feeling, but I highly doubt we'll see them in the films.
Yeah, I really don't want to see them in the films. I don't think that they work.
I agree,
especially with the extra lore that George added to the Star Wars mythos with the prequels and all of this. I don't, and this is the same reason why I don't want to see the Yuuzhan Vong War. As much as cool as a concept as the Yuuzhan Vong are, they really never became more than just a really cool concept in my head.
Right. I agree.
And they never really, they didn't produce any stories that I was really into with the Yuuzhan Vong War. The idea of this extragalactic threat works. I think that they should tie that into the Chiss ascendancy with
right.
With
and what
Thrawn's
are they?
origins.
The Grisks? Is that what
the Grisk? Yeah, the Grisk.
Yeah.
I think that you can have a similar thing where it's this extragalactic threat. I would not have them play out like the Yuuzhan Vong. Because again, it's something that as a kid I was like, oh, that's so cool. And then as an adult, I'm like, but that really doesn't work with any of the established lore.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah. And with the Ysalamari or the Ysalamari, it kind of fits in the same way, where it's like, it's really cool. And the scene where the long dead cloned Jedi Master Joris C'baoth, who is become a dark Jedi, because at the time of the writing of the novels, they didn't have the word Sith. They just called them Dark Jedi. They called Vader and Palpatine Dark Jedi in those books. The Joris C'baoth sending Force lightning towards Thrawn and having it blocked by the Ysalamari is such a cool scene, but it just does not work with the lore.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's one of those things, and I think thematically the Ysalamari are also at odds with Thrawn as a character, because as I saw it, Thrawn's main fatal flaw, Thrawn is a brilliant tactician. He has one fatal flaw in that he doesn't account for the Force.
Right.
He does not understand the Force. He does not account for the fact that the galaxy is trending toward a poetic state, so to speak.
Which I really feel like if he did, he could take a gross advantage of it.
Yeah, right. But the thing is that he doesn't, and that's his fatal flaw, is that he doesn't account for the Force. And him having this thing that negates the Force doesn't really fit with that fatal flaw in his character.
Right.
And
I agree.
So, yeah, I think, again, it's a cool concept, didn't really lead to much in the books that they were in. Other than just showing how smart Thrawn was for using them.
Yeah.
But there are other ways of showing his intelligence. But yeah, I don't want to see the Ysalamari in the new
I agree.
media.
Well, hey, we should probably pull out. This has been a ton of fun.
It has. I gotta come talk to you more often about this.
Yes, for sure.
And we will
definitely have you on the podcast again. But before we end, do you have anything of yours that you would like to shout out or promote?
Nah. It's been so long since I've published something under my own name for my own stuff. I wrote a play a couple of years ago called The Henderson Game, and the pro shot of that is on YouTube.
I was going to bring that up if you didn't.
Yeah.
It's
My name
really
is Seth.
good.
Yeah, my name is Seth Rosano, and you can Google that and the Henderson game, and it'll come up. If you want to see kind of... I mentioned about writing a story that had 6 main characters all have a big climactic moment at the same time. That was my attempt at doing that.
Right, and listen, Seth, you're one of my best friends, and like I want to specify that, so yes, maybe I'm a little biased when I say this, but this is the Henderson games was one of my favorite plays I have ever seen. I got to see it live. I went and watched it twice. I loved this play.
Oh, you flatter me, dude. Thank you.
I don't know. It's just it's really good, and I really like your writing ability and how you frame narrative and characters. I more people need to see it.
Well, I appreciate that. Other than that, there are projects that I'm currently working on kind of idly, but they're not close to... This episode will come out long before those are done. So, maybe in later episodes I'll have stuff to plug, but right now I don't really have much.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Animal Squadron. We really do appreciate it. Yeah,
thanks for listening to my random ramblings for the past half hour. It's not even been a half hour. It's been like an hour and a half. Anyways.
Yes.
Go ahead, Elijah.
If you guys want to be a part of this conversation, if you want to be a part of the random ramblings, you can email us at animalsquadron@gmail.com. Again, that is animalsquadron@gmail.com. If you're listening on a site where you can leave a review, we would love that. And if you're listening on Spotify, the question of the week will be what your thoughts are on the upcoming Heir to the Empire film and what you would like to see adapted from the original Thrawn trilogy.
There's a lot more to talk about than we covered here.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Anyway, thank you again for listening, and for the Animal Squadron, this has been Mother Goose.
And Seth Rosano. I'm going to go listen to more of your episodes now.
Hell yeah. Goodbye, everybody.
See ya.